Okay, we're all good. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Bruce McFarlane. I'm the CEO of BDC Partners, and today's the second of our webinars in the Why Franchise series. So BDC, if you haven't heard of us before, we help franchisors and retailers to grow and to succeed. We operate 5 businesses. We've got a property business where we help find sites. We're a recruitment business where we help find franchisees. We've got a law firm where we manage compliance and risk. We've got a performance business where we help find people to run franchise systems. And also we help survey franchisees for performance. And we've got a business called BDC Strategy, which is where we run webinars like this. So we help people to set up franchise systems. As part of BDC, we have a lot of very close relationships with what we call the BDC Collective. So we partner with some of the most influential people in the franchising community to help businesses to grow. So we work with BlueRock, who do accounting and finance and digital for franchisors and retailers. BF Brokers, they help sell resales and for franchise and business resales. Gap Maps, location intelligence, Associated Projects with shop fitting, Benjamin Insurance, and the Save Group for HR and compliance. So the BDC Collective are a big part of what we do. We'd also like to thank our partners for the webinar series. So we've got Spotlight Reporting, we have Docio, and we have Ops Central. So thank you very much for those. I'm just going to share my screen now. Just one moment. So hopefully everyone can see that. So today we're going to be talking about the details of franchise recruitment and legal compliance. So in our first webinar, we touched on strategy and business structure and also the financial modeling. So the second of the series today. So you'll see there, we're going to have a talk about the legal aspects, the recruitment aspects, and the resales part as well. Our panel today, or presenters today, so we have Christy Punuta, who's the Managing Director of BDC Law. So Christy's got a wealth of experience across as a franchisor and working in Boost Juice in-house, also at the ACCC, and also running law firms, and works for lots of large and small franchise systems. We've got Cameron Prosser as the Director of BF Brokers. So Cam, other than being a very attractive man, he's also a really good swimmer. But we're not going to talk about the swimming career today. What Cam does now is helps franchisors to sell their company-owned sites, helps franchisees to sell their businesses across the franchising and just business sales generally. And then Rory Cochran is the CEO of BDC Recruitment. So Rory also has been in the franchising sector a long time, working across a number of brands to help them grow. Food brands like Noodlebox and Snits, in fitness brands like F45, KX Pilates and others. Rory's helped them to grow their networks by recruiting quality franchisees. So we're going to start with the legal part today. Oh yeah, hang on, I've got one more slide. If you'd like to ask a question on the way through, we have a Q&A function. So feel free to ask the questions and I can ask the panel as they're talking. I'm going to go, Christy, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Okay, so with franchising, there are many rules that have to be followed that you should be aware of, I guess, when you're establishing a franchise system, but also for your ongoing relationship with your franchisees. And also in franchising, there's a lot of focus at the very beginning on the information that you provide to people before they actually become franchisees. So I'm going to take you through a bit of that today. So the first thing which I'd like to talk to you about is the Franchise Disclosure Register. So it's actually a requirement now that franchisors register themselves as a franchisor on this register. Now, it is a public register that can be accessed by anyone. Normally, it is going to be accessed by people who are looking to buy a franchise, but anyone can actually access it. The kind of information that you need to have on it is information that you would expect, like about your franchisor company, contact details, ABN, but also they will require some further information. Some other information is actually mandated as well. And so that might be information such as where you're currently set up, where you're looking to set up, the number of franchisees you have in your system, and then it will also ask for payment information as well. How much it costs to establish the franchise, what are the estimated range of costs to the franchisor and also to third parties in the franchise. So there's information that has to be included there, as well as some tick box scenarios. And so that's to do with things that normally happen in franchising, but don't happen in other type of business relationships, such as, will there be a restraint of trade after I leave? What happens to goodwill? So these are things that are required of all franchisors to put on this public register. At this stage, it's optional to include other documentation. But I have to say that is something that might potentially change, because on the 1st of April 2024, there will be a review of the register and things might be changing that way. Now, with the franchise disclosure register, one important thing to note is you need to be on this before you start offering your franchises. So that's something that's really important to be aware of. Now, in addition to the franchise disclosure register, making sure you're actually on that, another rule there is to hand out an information statement. So this is a prescribed form that you can get from the ACCC website. So the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission have a website where you can access this form. It's about 2 pages and it basically tells a prospective franchisee what franchising is all about. This has to be provided to someone no later than 7 days after they've expressed a genuine interest or they've applied for the franchise.
Yeah, CCC website's good. It's got lots of other information for people that are thinking of franchising,
Yeah.
Also for your franchisees once you're set up.
Yeah. Highly recommend that you have a look at the ACCC website, particularly in relation to franchising. So then with your pre-franchise requirements, so before you sign somebody up to a franchise agreement, or before you actually receive any money that's non-refundable from them, you actually have to provide them certain documents at least 14 days before they either enter into the agreement or pay this non-refundable money. So the first thing that's required is a disclosure document. Now, again, this is in a prescribed format, and there's a lot of information that has to be included in the disclosure document. Just for the purposes of giving you a feel of it, this is what it looks like in the code. So imagine you've actually got to fill this out with information. So the type of things that are required is some information about the franchisor, some information about the offices and the business experience.
Christy, sorry everyone, we're just going to change one thing for 1 sec.
Yep.
Can you turn your mic on, because I'm going to turn mine off just to make sure people can hear you.
Can everyone hear me now? Turn my sound on.
You're right, we can hear you. Keep going.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
There's echo. Okay, are we good now? Can you hear me all right? Okay. So with the disclosure document, there's information about the offices, there's information about your intellectual property, there's also information you need to share about their rights in regards to supply arrangements and the territories, and also payment information. Included in this, you actually need to provide some financials. So even if you are a brand new company, then you need to provide These are things that take time to put together, you know, I highly recommend that you start to have a little look at the code and the disclosure document, as well as the ACCC website, which has a lot of information on this, which can guide you through the type of things that you need to include. Now, there's also a key fact sheet. The key fact sheet is basically a summary of the key information that's included in the disclosure document. So this was also recently introduced as part of the requirements under the Franchising Code of Conduct. With the key fact sheet, what you have to keep in mind is that it needs to be consistent with the actual disclosure document. So you have your disclosure document, your key fact sheet, and then in addition to that, you have to give a final version of the franchise agreement 14 days before it's signed. This is so that the prospective franchisee can get independent legal advice, financial advice, or accounting advice on the final documentation, and they have time to do this before it's signed. It's actually a requirement under the code that you recommend that they get this advice, and then you actually have a document confirming that. Now things get a little bit more complicated if there is a lease that the franchisor holds and they want to sublease it or license it to the prospective franchisee. Then you also need to be providing a copy of that lease, or at least the offer letter and the disclosure statement. So that is a lot of information, but I wanted to share with you the type of things that have to be provided even before you sign a franchisee up, and they are really important. There's a lot of focus on this under the Franchising Code of Conduct. There's rules around non-refundable money, so deposits really have to be refundable up until a point, and there's also cooling off rights for franchisees as well. So once they sign the agreement, they have 14 days in which they can cool off and terminate. Moving to the next slide.
Cool. There you go.
Yep. So I've mentioned to you the Franchising Code of Conduct. This is basically an industry code that sits under the Competition and Consumer Act, and it has the force of law. So it really has to be complied with. It's the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission that enforces this. With penalties that are attached to a lot of these obligations, so if they're not followed, there can be a lot of consequences. But basically what the Franchising Code does is it seeks to regulate the relationship between the franchisor and franchisee by putting a big emphasis on disclosure and what has to be provided before somebody signs up and becomes a franchisee. There's requirements to act in good faith on both the franchisor and franchisee. And there's also some pathways to dispute resolution, which is actually a really helpful thing. If there's a dispute between the parties and one person notifies the other of the dispute, then the other party has to attend. And this is a much more cost-effective and quicker way to resolve disputes, obviously, than litigation. There's also rules around termination as well. So it's not saying that a franchisee cannot be terminated. It's putting rules in place so that proper processes are followed. For example, if there's a breach, you need to give notice, you need to give an opportunity to remedy, and these things have to be done unless there's special circumstances allowing termination otherwise. Moving to the next one. But there are other considerations as well when it comes to setting up a franchise system. So it's really important to think about what the corporate structure is. Now, normally what is recommended is to try and keep your assets and liabilities separate from each other. So normally, for example, the trademarks or the intellectual property is held in a different entity to the franchisor entity. If the franchisor plans to have some of their own businesses as well, again, that is likely to be a separate entity. But keeping all this in mind, you also need to think in your disclosure document that these type of things have to be disclosed. Talking about intellectual property, it's really important. If you're going to be granting franchises, I can guarantee you one of the things that a lawyer is going to tell the prospective franchisee is to make sure that there's intellectual property rights which can be licensed to the franchisees to use. Because you don't want to be buying into a brand, spending a lot of money, and then finding that the franchise is being challenged legally on these rights. So it's important to file and register trademarks. It's also important to understand there's other laws which actually affect franchising, such as franchisor liability provisions under the Fair Work Act, which means that franchisors sometimes can be held liable if their franchisees aren't adhering to specific employment laws. And just to finish off as a bit of a tip, because we're focusing on the pre-franchise stage, really you want to get some privacy policies in place as soon as you start taking people's personal information. And if you're going to be sharing information with people prior to them signing up, you also want them signing a confidentiality deed. Great. I might just finish there.
No problem at all. We did have one question come through around, so when you're setting up your structure, you can use companies and trusts, and yeah, so it doesn't matter they don't have to be, like, I know often they're not sole traders, they're not individuals, but you can have a mix of different structures.
Yeah, but I do highly recommend that financial advice is sought on that as well as the legal advice.
Yeah, go and touch a lot. Yeah, so if you've got any questions, yeah, feel free to any legal on the legal structuring side, send them through, and I can jump back to Christy as we go. But we might move off the legal side onto, you know, once you've set all your documents up, you know, you've got your structure set up, then you need to go and find some franchisees, Rory. The fun part.
Sure do. Sure do. Hi. Hi, everyone. So I've just got 4 parts of my role to go through with you today. And I think the biggest one right at the start is making sure you have a B2B marketing strategy. And that's really identifying not who your customers are, but who would buy your business. Who are your target market? What age? Are they male, female? Where do they hang out? What do they like? What don't they like? And it's really important to build a strategy around, even collateral around, imagery around selling your business, not your product. So if you're in a food business, it's not about someone just serving food, but it's about the experience of running a business. So it's always making sure who would buy your brand rather than who are your customers. Also, the reality is quite often your customers are people that buy your brand. So that's that one. And it's crucial to get that done prior to launching in the market. Slide 2, Bruce. Lead generation is such a crucial part in this game, and I've worked in this space for 20 odd years, and you know, it's evolved so much over time. To when I first started recruiting, we would put an ad in the Age, to now it's such a competitive space, and it's really trying to work out for your business where your leads come from. In that, in the chart here, you should have a number of organic leads that just directly come to your website because they're clients of yours. They go onto your website and they see that you're franchising. We have referrals. We have paid socials. That can be Facebook now. That can be Instagram. We can evolve into YouTube. We can, you know, there's Snapchat. There's so many channels that may work or not work for your brand. LinkedIn, Seek, Eden Exchange. So it's a really big part of when you decide who your customers are. It's also working out where the best channels to market for your business are.
So, Rory, are you using TikTok yet?
No.
No one's using TikTok?
No one's... No? Lisa? And I'm very lucky that, you know, I've got an incredible marketing person that, you know, researches and looks for this stuff for me. But once you know what you're doing, it's really important to look, because, you know, we work with brands that Google works for one and Facebook works for the next one. So it's always, again, looking at your ads very regularly, weekly, to see what works for you and what doesn't work. Probably the biggest thing that we've found over time is that quite often leads won't buy when they inquire. And it's really important to then build and nurture an email campaign to continually follow up those leads. It might be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or 2 years down the track that for whatever reason they couldn't afford it at the time, or timing wasn't right, that they then will, if you're constantly ticking at them or tapping at them through email nurtures or communication, that they might jump back in and buy your business down the track. So that's the big one. Most people buy your business are your clients, but they also need to see your marketing. So it's not necessarily when a client goes into your business, most of them don't know you're a franchise, they just like your product. So it's usually other channels from seeing them on Facebook or socials that they go, oh, I really like that business, I didn't know they were franchising. Or the other one is they're not going to approach the owner of the business about franchising, but they will go to your website and inquire another way. Be really consistent with your marketing. Don't start and stop, because every time you stop your leads, they go back into a lead learning phase, and it can really hurt the consistency of your leads tapping in and getting them right over time. And I also encourage with budgeting, if you've got a small budget, then pick 1 or 2 areas you want to go to and put your money into 1 or 2 areas. Don't put your money across Australia, for example, because you're just not going to have the right reach for the leads that you want. So that's leads. Profiling. In my time, I've worked for brands that just want sell. We just need to get to 100 or 200. But what that's wrought with is bringing in the wrong franchise partners. And as much as that feels like a really good quick fix at the time and it's financially viable, and sometimes you need the cash for the franchise fee, we get all of that. But the long-term relationship is going to be really hard, and they're going to be a hard franchise to manage if you don't have value alignment. You're not aligned in your work ethic. You're not aligned in your expectations. They're not system followers. So we use a really incredible tool called Oracle Profiling that not only matches, there's other profiling tools out there that just assess the franchise partner. The good thing with Oracle is it profiles the franchisor to identify their key values, their work ethic, their competencies, so that when we bring a potential franchise partner through, they have to be an 85% match to the values and alignment of the franchisor that we're bringing the person into. Essentially, that should result in a much better franchise relationship and expectation along the way.
And it's interesting, Rory, isn't it, that sometimes the first, 10, 12, the dirty dozen, the first franchisees are a different type of franchisees to when you're a more mature system. So the profiling tool does identify some of those things as well. And
it also builds foundations for the person coming in that you genuinely care about the relationship. But you're right, like quite often in franchise brands, the first 10 are whoever have a checkbook and come into the brand. But as you evolve in a business, I really believe that the long-term relationship of the franchise is about bringing the right franchise partners into the mix. And a tool like this helps. There's other tools out in the market, but I really like this one because it's both sides of the mix.
And also because some of the businesses you work for, it's pretty cheap to get into, and so they're attracting a certain type of franchise partner, and others there's a big financial commitment, but doesn't mean the relationship isn't vital in either way.
Yeah, and I also think this tool is also, if you come in and there's a score in it that might be slightly low, it also helps the franchisor to train that potential franchisee. So if they're a little bit less in the customer service side, or they're a little bit less in an area which is trainable, it's the franchisor's opportunity to then really work and train that person. So, the recruitment process. This is a big one, and again, I think it creates credibility to a brand when you follow a process. In any franchise, you'll have rookie inquiries that come in and they want to deviate from the process, or they just want the numbers, or they just want to know the profitability, or they just want to talk to the franchisor. But I really pride myself in the brands I work with is just to follow a really strict process. And in that process, first phone call, it's about finding out about them. It's giving them the foundations of the brand. It's qualifying them to make sure that they can, afford the brand. They understand the expectations of the brand. They have a little bit of understanding of franchising. From there, it's application and profile, and they'll always come back, I just want to know the numbers. Great, we can actually go through that. But first, you've got to understand for the brand, I need to get a little bit of information about you. So I always take them straight to an application of profiling space. And once we've done the application and profile, then I'll always jump on the Zoom and I'll go through a cash flow forecasting tool and I'll talk through a business plan with them. So we get them to work along the way to make sure that they're researching and they're working the brand. And you'll find people will drop off at these points if they're not really serious about the brand. Cash flow and business plan, again, we don't make representation. Christy, just making sure. We don't make representation, but we talk about, we always use templates, and we get them to talk to existing franchise partners or the franchisor about the business, and they do their own due diligence on the brand. They fill out cash flow, obviously a bit different from what Cam will talk about because he sells existing businesses, and then business plan. We then have an opportunity to meet some key team members in the brand and ask some bigger questions about the brand or something that I can't answer. We go through due diligence, which is all about the legal documentation, the expectations, the foundation is the legal documentation, and then we'll go to a deposit. And really that deposit is a fully refundable deposit, but again, it's to get that commitment. And then in different brands, we're a little bit different. We might then have to go to a panel interview at this point, and then we would issue formal legal documentation, and then we'd essentially hand them over to the franchisor, and they'd take them through the journey of finding the site, finding the site and going through training and so forth. So it's really important that you follow a process, whatever it may be, and really try and not deviate from that process because you've got a good applicant or they've owned franchises before. I got caught up in that when I was younger. Oh, they've owned franchises before, they're amazing, let's skip that process. But that's not what you should do. You should always just stay in line with your process.
Yeah, and they've got to match your brand. So I had a question come through, Rory. So where do most of your successful franchisees usually come from? Like where does the lead generation get the best results?
Google. Google, a lot of our franchise recruitment, as I was saying, is a client, but they've come through a media channel. So, they might have come through Facebook or Instagram or Google. The biggest one we've had of late is our email nurture campaigns. So we've just been working with our clients' databases where they were inquiries over the last 2 years, and I've just transacted 2 franchise for that brand from old leads that were still thinking about it. So all of it's important because they, in any marketing channel, they've got to see you from lots of different spots. But your clients, email nurtures, and just having advertising out there at all times. That's me.
Cam, the same question. Before we get into the presentation, you use the same platforms when you're selling businesses. Is Google the same?
Yeah, look, I'd probably answer that question first by saying each brand is different. Okay. You want to catch different fishes, you use different bait. You've got your burley in the water, but what are you actually targeting as that right franchisee or partner? And then that will determine that answer. We use obviously third-party business for sale websites that are only allowed, I suppose, representation of those going concern businesses. Some of them allow greenfield advertising. We obviously do social media spend. We find that works really well if the exiting vendor, whether that be a company owned or a franchisee owned, is happy to name the location and name that business. There's obviously sensitivity around that, but if we can do a social media spend, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, that always captures really good return on investment, I suppose, because a small business operator should be living within 30 minutes drive time, in our belief. So if it is sort of an owner-occupier business, that's sort of where we see to get our best bang for the buck. Look, we've been established for over 30 years as a database at BF Brokers, so we also get a reasonably good uptake when we do an EDM with a new brand or something that is new to market. So there is a lot of entrepreneurs that sit on our database, and on most business broker databases they should have. So they are those first movers that Rory touched on that maybe are excited to jump into a new concept, a new brand, and really take it at the early adopter stage, and then look to exit. So look, I'll jump into my part, but yeah, keep the questions coming, guys, and we'll answer them as they pop up. So I'm a thorn between two roses here when it comes to our presentation. I've really sort of angled at the fact that recruitment through business sales is something that I push as a really positive way to do it, and that is not treating all exits as a negative aspect. So I'm not going to go into how to really value businesses, but really having a successful business operating can allow us to really market how good these opportunities are to do greenfields. So the first one I've got there is borrowing capacity to fund growth. Rory was talking about the marketing channels and really making sure that you have a marketing spend that you can help build your brand through. And so having a going concern that is providing some of that, not only through the franchise fees, but through other successful businesses is a mechanism that I really love to see. Multiple site operators, it's whether you are after these sort of people, but if you were to establish 1 or 2 company-owned sites, it really gives you the advantage to then present 1 or 2 of these sites as you think they mature to the market and do your recruitment and your growth through that. Okay. Again, referring to that top point, that business operation can actually have borrowing capacity to get into, unlike the hard job that Rory may have occasionally to find finance for someone coming in. Banks will lend on that operation. The big part of that is my third point there, owner occupiers versus under management. Again, this will come down to what sort of brand you're representing and how that fits with your model. Do you leverage off this is a brand that can be run under management, so the multi-sites are pushed and people can really get a catchment of a number of locations. There's economies of scale there with staffing, etc. Or can they be sporadic? Can they be spread across the country, nationally or even internationally? It's important to note at this that we work closely with conjunctions with BDC Recruitment or the recruitment side of the internal franchisor. At the end of the day, we're all working to strengthen the brand and get good operators in. It's all about transparency with us because we take the black and whites of the existing business. Okay, what is the current P&Ls? What is the current lease? What is the current staff schedule? What is the current assets, liabilities, stock? And we present that to the market. So we're really fortunate that we've got a black and white document that we can put to market and price accordingly, which helps very much on the recruitment side of things. I'll just move forward, Bruce, to the next slide. Company-owned locations. This is what I was sort of speaking about at the start. It is something that I really, really love to see brands do if they've got the capacity and the head office capabilities, really allowing us to have that brand move to a mature phase and then capture a operator that isn't probably just jumping up at something flash, but they're in it for the long term. They really want to build that business from the foundations that the company has established and are often really, really good long-term loyal franchisees. They contribute back to the brand through learning, obviously, your systems and processes, but also often helping to grow those through things you weren't doing in your company owned, but can be implemented across the whole network. When we work with company-owned locations, it's important that those leads that we generate across the third-party business sale websites, across the social media, across the events or the database, we don't lose as well. We often will take those company-owned leads that don't work for that particular geographical location and pass them on to your recruitment team. So someone like Rory could have a whole lot of leads that she can start with straight away because geographically that site that's up didn't work, or even financially. Often a going concern business will be a lot more expensive than what a franchise territory or greenfield territory will cost. So that's another way to ensure recruitment or growth.
I've just got a question. Can I just interrupt? Yep. I've just got one question or two that have come through, but one just on that point around company owned. And, when a franchisor is selling a company owned, how do you prepare the financials, given that they might have a different cost base? Because, if it's run as a company owned store, there might be more costs or less costs. And for the franchise system, I think that's it's
Yeah, fantastic,
important.
fantastic question. Absolutely. So we normalise it. Okay, so we may do a simple trading statement, or we may do some add backs in the P&Ls. So absolutely, we're adding in the franchise fees as an expense would be a perfect example of that.
Yep.
We may be adding in some extra wages. We may be having to add in an extra bit of rent. The head office has been given a really, favourable rental from the landlord because they are also leasing a number of other sites in some of their other assets. So absolutely, really good question. We have to normalise those financials, and again, just being really transparent about it. Why? The positives to this is also it's not just about a sale price with this strategy. It's making sure that you get a long-term franchisee that is going to be beneficial for that brand over a long term. So you may even discount the sale price because you see that that inquirer or that potential purchaser as a fantastic person to bring onto your brand, and therefore you may actually sell for unders for what the market may be willing to pay. So that's another aspect.
Just on that, Cam, sorry, I'm going to just continue on the same theme, but
yep,
the legal part of this is also very interesting because I know, Cam, you're putting information together for franchisors when they're selling company-owned stores, and what sort of disclaimers or do you have to, you protect the franchisor because that they aren't the actual figures, they're projected figures based on assumptions that the franchisors make. So do you think, Christy, there's disclaimer, you need to go a little bit harder on the disclaimers in this case? Or
with franchising, I talked about how it's not just the franchising code that applies, and there's also rules around misleading and deceptive conduct. So you have to be very careful with any representations that are made that could be relied on before people sign up, especially if it's to do with earnings information. So what is recommended in that case is to make sure you're explaining things very clearly, and also that they are getting that advice.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
The important part, Bruce, is not projections. Okay, so you're not projecting out any revenue or anything like that. You are providing what additional expenses will a new franchisee take on with a franchise agreement, and there's a disclosure document that Christy spoke about, and multiple documents that you're putting with the current trading P&L to ensure that they have full disclosure. Absolutely. So yeah, representations are so crucial, but certainly not trying to sell what the future earnings would be. Absolutely not. So yeah, we'll just go to, I suppose, like I touched on, exit strategies. Please never think, well, it's great when a franchisor sees this has not always been a negative. Okay, there are multiple reasons why you may come across an exit. The first obvious one is a great ROI. We've had those early adopters come in. They're confident about this successful business model, jumped in, and they will have an exit strategy already set up to get a good ROI. So let's foster that and lean in on that exiting franchisee with a positivity. Fresh and enthusiastic operators. Okay, occasionally a brand will see those tired franchisees, those that have run their race within an industry. I'll use health and fitness. 5 to 7 years is usually the key time. So it's not a business or a job that you may run for 30 years. This is often an industry thing where people are just looking to exit. And then also it gives the opportunity to do a refurbishment or an update with the brand, whether that be a refurbishment of new signage, whether that be a refurbishment of the fit out and fixtures. But that handover to a new owner allows them to get the kudos or the really excitement based off that refurbishment, and that is a really positive thing to push. Bruce and Rory touched on it before. You attract different franchisees at this stage, okay, and it's important that your franchisees evolve with the business life cycle of your brand as well. Through this, again, I just wanted to back over how important it is to qualify a potential purchaser or a new franchisee. Okay, this is something we do through an expression of interest document. We make sure that they are both commercially qualified, but also financially qualified to take on this business. We don't want to see them buy the business and not have the cash flow to continue to operate and do the things they need to do, especially if this does include a refurbishment. And then just to touch on Christy's part of the exit, the whole legal side of things. So making sure these disclosure documents were provided in time, making sure deposits weren't taken before ahead of time. A really important example for this is a Section 52 in Victoria. Okay, it's only in Victoria, but you cannot take a deposit for a sale of a business until there's been a Section 52 signed off by the accountant and the vendor. If you do so, a contract is null and void. So some important legal aspects we need to watch for on a resale. And then, of course, that contract of sale. We ensure that solicitors, as fantastic as they all are, Bruce and Christy, that we don't have ones that try to sell BHP when we've got a really goodwill transaction occurring, and just keeping the transaction or the two parties moving towards settlement on a contract of sale that is commercial and ensure it touches on all the commercial parts that protect both you as the franchisor exiting or the franchisee exiting, but also the incoming purchaser is going to be able to run the business with the right warranties and the right protections that taking on a business will require. So that's it from me.
Thanks, Cam. Sorry, I was just trying to find the link for our next one, but distracted. But going back to your ROI point, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Like you talked about health and fitness, and the 5 to 7 years is actually something that's probably in food and others. And it's sort of a little bit, you got your retail leases, 5 years. So there's lots of people that they get through the first term of their franchise agreement or their first term of their lease, and then they get into the new one, and then they start to think about selling. And so, but back to the return on investment, you need to make sure that if they borrowed money to, like how long has it taken to pay back the loans that they've had in place, and you're hoping that they can do that in a year, 2 years, 3 years and stuff. So then they're starting to be a lot more profitable for those later years. So is that something you think, is it, it's linked to that, or is there other factors around return on investment and getting it, earlier?
Yeah, look, certainly when you start to talk about multiples on sale prices, there's things that are linked with your leases and your time in the industry. Always franchise agreement and lease renewals do, start to have people, scratch their heads and consider, is it time to exit? The one thing to flag is to make sure wherever you take up an option on a lease, you ask for one to be added to your back end, so the incoming purchaser has that time. But yeah, look, mate, I think it's a bit of a balance between what industry that business is operating in and how quickly maybe they are worked to the position of wanting to do something different. Okay. Or is it a pretty hands-off business where staffing are doing most of the hard work and pulling and pushing things, whatever it may be. So, service business versus a marketing sort of, face-to-face with clientele sort of business. Lots of industries will always have different, I suppose, length of stay.
Yep. Cool. Thank you. Just making sure. So Robert, we saw one that you've been using TikTok. I'm looking forward to seeing your TikToks, the videos that you're producing, and people in the landscaping game watching you, as you grow your franchise system using TikTok. It's good that you got some leads. That's fantastic. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to just jump to my last slide, which I was going to do. This is, as I said, this is a series. This is the second of the 6-part series. The next webinar, which is on the 8th of August, we're going to look at technology and how people are using technology to generate and build operational efficiency, to create great experiences for their customers and their franchisees. So in that presentation, we've got, we'll hear from Ops Central, we'll also hear from Docio and from Blue Rock Digital. So what I was trying to find was the link, but what I'll do is we'll send you an email afterwards, which will have the link to the next one, so you can register for next time. Also the link to the last one as well. So if you want to watch, if you missed the first one, you can do that as well. So, but thank you very much. Thanks to Cam and Rory and to Christy for our presenters today. Thanks for all of the participants that have jumped on, or people that are watching this later on the recording. Thank you very much. See ya.